This is ACOFAE. Laura Marie and Jessica Marie proudly present A Court of Fandoms and Exploration, a podcast. Fair warning, everything the hosts say is explicit, full of spoilers and adult content and shall not be used against them. They have opinions. Let's try not to drag anyone for expressing themselves and just have fun for an hour. We all deserve it.
This episode does not contain spoilers, but does mention Everything Everywhere All at Once, Turning Red, and My So-Called Life. For a full list, please see show notes. There are also conversations surrounding racism, generational trauma, and fatphobia.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to A Court of Fandoms and Exploration, your weekly deep dive into the YA literature and fandoms that we love. I'm Laura Marie.
And I'm Jessica Marie.
And today we are welcoming a very special guest and our new friend, Maurene Goo,
whose newest release is Throwback. Welcome, Maurene.
Welcome.
Hi, guys. I am Maurene Goo, and it is so wonderful to be here.
We are so excited to have you. We have so much to talk about. Just to start off, I want to let you know that I love this book. I have read this book twice. I have cried both times. And also, going through this was very special for a lot of reasons, which we'll get into. But I recently just finished a rewatch of My So-Called Life, and I am an Aries. So this was very, very special for me. And Jess, I know it was very special for you as well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't think you want to see my copy of the arc that Xando had provided us, because I was making notes and writing things, and it was just so relatable. I loved how it's just like this multi-generational, like there's a deep love, but there's confusion and frustration and cultural balance. Like for me personally, my family came over from Cuba. So I'm first generation American. So like seeing the different dynamics between the grandma and Priscilla and older Priscilla, younger Priscilla and Samantha, and just the different dynamics between them at different points and in different decades is so you do kind of see, you're like, oh, I get it, but it also sucks. And Samantha even says that. She's like, it's okay. And it's okay for it's going to suck. Like it was just everything. It was just like, up and here's, a lot of trauma relatability there in this one, but in a good way, in a growing kind of way.
Oh, I'm so glad. Yeah. I mean, that was kind of my big, hope for the book, right? To tell these stories of different generations of women in the same family. And, especially, this is specifically about, a Korean immigrant family and then the descendants from the immigrants. But I really feel like it's kind of a universal story about intergenerational dynamics and traumas, obviously, which I feel like is a popular topic in popular culture right now. And I don't think there's I don't think that's a coincidence. It's like a bunch of us are writing these stories now. And so we're in a place, especially women. And I think Asian American women are we were becoming storytellers. And so you have things like Turning Red and Everything Everywhere All at Once. It's not a coincidence that we're finally trying to unpack all of this stuff through our stories. But thank you. I'm glad it resonated.
Oh, it absolutely did.
Do you feel that it's become like we're getting to that place where like a safe space that we can tell those stories without, I don't know, I don't want to say backlash, but who do you feel like the character you were like more in this book? Were you like Sam, very outspoken in your beliefs, or was it more of the, and I'm speaking from an eldest daughter situation. I was very compliant, very complacent, like, yes, whatever you say, I'll internalize everything. And it's still stuff that you have to unpack as you get older.
Yeah. So Priscilla is the mom, and she is a first generation Korean American. So her parents were immigrants to LA from Korea. And then Sam is Priscilla's daughter, who is a Gen Z, like present day teenager, and she's second generation. So I felt like, obviously I'm much closer in age to Priscilla. And I say that like I kept the years just far away enough from me. So I'm like, I am not Priscilla's age. That'll just like send me into a spiral, but I am pretty much Priscilla's age. I just happen to have a toddler and not a teenage daughter at the moment. But if I'm being realistic, like I actually much more relate to Sam, not in her relationship with her mother. I had a very similar dynamic to Priscilla and her mom, just because my mom was a Korean immigrant and all the issues that they have are pretty similar to the issues that I had and a lot of people my age had with their parents. But as far as like worldview and confidence level, I was more like Sam. I wasn't as together and with it and obviously as evolved as Sam because I was a 90s kid, sadly. But I was always tougher than I was a fighter. I spoke up a lot, but I also grew up with a lot of Korean American friends. And the suburb that I grew in, which is in Throwback, it's basically the same suburb. I just named it something different. It was very diverse by the time I went to high school, but like the little generation before me, the Gen X, because I am like the elderly millennial or whatever, the oldest millennial, but Gen X, they had a different experience. Even in my community, it was a lot more homogenous, a lot more like pressure to be assimilated. And by the time I went to high school, a lot of that was kind of like changing already. For me, for our like particular demographic. So I didn't have a lot of the issues that Priscilla had. I had some, but as far as your relationship to her Korean American identity, I much more relate to Sam. Although like I didn't grow up in the time of K-pop and K-dramas being popular, I had friends that like didn't think that was weird, so that helped me kind of have confidence in that part of my identity. But yeah, I am like a blend though, because I truly am Priscilla's generation. I can't deny that.
Something that you brought up is that we are all, I say we, the collective we are all of an age now where we are able to produce art and to really kind of exercise all of these feelings that we've had for a long time and put it out there. So as you said, all of this new, I also heard the term millennial rage. These projects are coming out to kind of deal with this. My question kind of is, when we look back on our childhoods, we do have the tendency to have rose-colored glasses. And I know like the 90s now, as in the book, are back in style, very much so. When I went back to read this, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so accurate. This is the 90s. Everything is so wonderful. My rose-colored glasses were on, and then the casual racism comes out, and it's like, oh yes, it was exactly like this. We cannot forget this. And that's very important. And I do feel that sometimes in projects when we are, looking back, that we kind of gloss over that. And I love that this was so much a part of this book. Obviously, it's a part of the entire plot. But it is important to be critical when we are reflecting. And I really enjoyed that here.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's a fine balance because obviously like the book is supposed to be fun. I mean, it is fun, I hope. It's like a lighthearted kind of like time travel story, but you cannot go back in time and ignore, obviously it's not like the world is perfect now. Oh my gosh, far from it. But when you step back and you do a little time travel in your brain, you're like, oh, we have actually evolved, thank goodness, with certain things, at least what we find acceptable to say in public. And I knew, obviously, going to this book, like, I'm going to have to talk about some casual racism, sexism, fatphobic language, all this crap, and ableism and everything. Definitely, I have to acknowledge that. But then I started writing the book and really kind of digging into my memories of the things the kids would say. Or, there's a racist teacher in the book that is very much based on a teacher that I had in high school. I do not care if she finds out because she's a bad person, unless maybe she's changed. Hopefully you changed, lady. But she, when I was remembering and I was trying to recreate this character, I was like, actually, this was so messed up. And, I kind of look at it lightly. And I think when you're a teenager, you're really kind of tough. you're tough and you also like pretend like you don't care about stuff. So, me and my friends experienced a lot of crap, and we all kind of brushed it off, and we were like, oh, whatever, like LOL, racist teacher. But then I think about it now and I'm like, that's actually really horrible and demeaning, and how helpless we were to actually do or say anything about it, or so we felt helpless. So, it was kind of like unpacking all of that stuff was kind of much more intense than I anticipated, because, I give it a light touch in the book. I don't dwell too much on it because it's not the point of the book. The point of the book is not like, wasn't the past so unwoke and now we're woke? It's not. It's just like, there are differences, and it shaped your mother. And this is what you have to understand, where your mom's coming from. You did not grow up in the same world. And she can look at that with humor, and also with like, she's horrified. Sam is often like, what are you guys talking about? Like, and the way her mom is always talking about her weight or like other people's weight, like we realized that was so normal for us. So yeah, it was a trip to have to like go back and relive some of that stuff, but it was also very cathartic, to like kind of write it out and be like, I love writing it from a point of view of someone who knows better and is like this, and they can just say like, this is horrible. So it's, that was like nice to be able to acknowledge.
Now, and Jess, I know that you absolutely love the time travel here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we're both fans of time travel and sci-fi and fantasy, and you do it so seamlessly in this book. You like, there were questions that I'd be like, oh my gosh, but now it's all very trippy in a good way because of how well you explain it, and there aren't really loopholes. So it's like we're trying to keep it spoiler free. But the way, the lineage, and you're wondering, how is the past going to impact the present / future? And you do little things that, anybody who's familiar with time traveling, you're like, you can't do huge impacts. Mm-hmm. You can't, because that can alter everything else in the future. And that's one of the first questions she asks. She's like, what am I doing back here? What is the purpose? Right. Is it supposed to prevent 9/11? Is it supposed to prevent the pandemic? Like, what is it that I am here to do? Right. And she doesn't do these drastic changes, but there's one specifically where she helps Miss Joe, and it was just this small little thing that's not going to impact the world, but to help the person who helped her in this time of uncertainty.
Yeah, I love Mrs. Joe. She's maybe one of my favorite character in the book. Mrs. Joe is an old lady, for listeners who have not read the book, who basically decides just out of the goodness of her heart to help this random teenager who is clearly lost. Yeah, the time travel things. I'm so glad you like the time travel. Well, one, I am also a huge fan of time travel stories, and I was, I knew I would write one day. And so I'm really glad I did it in this form. And it's obviously an homage to Back to the Future. One of my favorite movies of all time, probably what started my love of time travel as a kid, as a genre. But I also know my limitations as a contemporary YA novelist. I am not a hardcore sci-fi person. I do appreciate really good sci-fi, but my brain is not wired to think of such imaginative / fact-based things. So I knew that if I have time travel, it's going to be a light touch. It's going to be like Back to the Future, but even more light touch, because Back to the Future has like a flux capacitor, right? And like they go into like the timelines. And I was like, if I try to do that, I'm going to, one, mess it up, and two, this book is going to become weird. So I knew, keep it simple, keep it in the tone of like the slew of like 80s and 90s movies that just had inexplicable magical twists, like Big, like Freaky Friday. So it's kind of like or 13 going on 30 and 17 again, one of my favorite movies of all time. Zac Efron's finest film. But I felt like, okay, I'm going to give it a light touch, and we're just going to like hand wave the time travel, but I did make sure it made sense. Like I'm not going to do things that, because readers are smart, they're going to be like, this makes no sense, and you never want to write something that kind of stops people from like believing in the world. So I did have to be a little careful, but definitely like just a fun time travel as opposed to like pretty like a complex or anything that really involves like physics.
No, and even at the end of the book, it's like everything is tied up in a great little bow. So you're just like, wait, how did this from earlier? And no, everything is that's one of those things because you can get so wrapped up into it so easily, especially when it comes to time travel.
Yeah, I made sure to set it up so that there's nothing that could be messed up because I'm like, keep it simple. The simpler it is, like the less you can mess up at the end. So thank you. I'm glad that the ending was satisfying.
Now, you mentioned that you always knew that you were going to write a time travel story. Can you kind of take us through the idea process and kind of how this story came to be?
Sure. So not only did I always want to write a time travel story, but I always wanted to write like a mother-daughter YA novel. A couple of my YA novels have had really great father-daughter relationships, which are always beloved, I think, in stories. And especially in YA, people really love a cute father-daughter story. And I'm like, you know why? Because they're easy. Those are like cute, right? Because dads are like, la, la, la. But a mother-daughter story, especially with teens, is like way more complicated. Just by nature, it's a more complicated relationship. I speak very generally. Obviously, some people have great, easy relationships with their moms, and I'm like, who are you and what happened? But so Throwback was a culmination of me. I'm like, I got to write this mother-daughter book, but I can't. It's going to be too angsty, right? Like, I don't want it to be too like, like all in the feelings and like just like angry people. So it needs to be, my number one goal with all of my books is like, they've got to be fun. They've got to be a place you want to be and you want to like, want to escape to. So time travel was an idea I had because of Back to the Future. I'm like, what if for a long time I called this book Back to the Future Asian Mom. So, it's just Back to the Future Asian Mom. And to me, that's like such a fun package, kind of an irresistible, like everybody knows what Back to the Future is. So you kind of know what you're getting into, but just making it my own. And so I kind of just sat down with my husband one day because he's also a storyteller. He writes animated movies. And I'm like, let's like bang out the story. I have an idea. And so we just like brainstormed and I kind of like knew exactly what it would be. Once I figured out mother-daughter, but the mom is first generation. It's not going to be an immigrant kid because I also did the math and I'm like, time has been passing and teenagers today, their parents are not my parents' generation. They are my age and a little older. So of course there's going to be a second generation story to tell there, which is, I feel like it hasn't been explored that much, like a Korean American second generation story. So I was really excited by the opportunity to tell it this way. And to make her mom like super Americanized, like popular cheerleader, like that kind of girl. Cause I'm like, that is so, you haven't seen that, rather than like some sad, unpopular outcast Asian American kid. I'm like, I don't want to write that story. Those stories are important, but like, this is different. So, once I figured out the mother-daughter dynamic, the time travel device, it was like, it all fell into place. And I also knew there's got to be a romance. Like, there's no way in hell she's going to go time travel and not like find a cute boy and make it like so, because time cross romance is one of my favorite genres, are amazing because it's inherently like, will they, won't they? It's so tense because it's like, this is not meant to be. Like, you guys are in different times. How are you going to work this out? So that tension is like catnip for me. So I really liked writing that.
And what I love is that even though you have it in there, it's also not a romance, it's because that's not the center point of all of this is her going back in time and figuring out who her real, I say lack of a better word, love of her life is. And I say that in air quotes. Mm-hmm. She's just like, she's also growing as a person while she's still, I guess, true to herself while being very aware of how she's wording certain things, because even if she's aware of 90s references, she goes, okay, but what point in the 90s was that? I shouldn't bring up Clueless. Did that come out yet?
You can't Google it, because she's like, because that's what kids do. They don't remember stuff. They're like, I'm just going to Google, when did Clueless come out? But it's like,
or ask Alexa.
You don't have Google, man. This is really a love story between her and her mom, at the end of the day. And so, It is, to me, there's so many rom-com moments with Jamie because I can't help it. I have to include that kind of stuff. But yeah, the romance is like just part of the story. It's to like spice it up a little.
No. And it's so fun from the moment because even their interactions, you can tell where they're just like, you know what, maybe I was too hard. I mean, everybody is kind of on edge when you meet them in their own individual world. So when they're coming together, they're all kind of bringing their own angst into their meet cutes with one another, whether it's the romantic relationships or the platonic relationships. Everybody's already on edge for something else.
I love a meet cute where everyone's dealing with their own baggage.
Well, and you say baggage. Some of these, and this is not a spoiler, some of these fights between mothers and daughters, I've had these fights. These fights are real. I've said these words. I've said that I hate you. I've thrown that out there, and that gross feeling that sits with you after. This was obviously, clearly, I have mommy issues. This was very cathartic.
Who doesn't?
Honestly, it really does seem that way. And my daddy issues came up very strong. My own background is very similar to Priscilla's father. That situation is very similar to mine, even the time frame. So this was,
oh gosh,
this was very, very relatable to me, even though I obviously cannot speak on the Korean American experience. My point to all of this is to say that you wrote these fights real life, I'm going to say beautifully. Where did this kind of come from? I cannot imagine that this was a fun section to write.
Yeah, I was just talking to someone the other day about the fight scene with her mom. There's one, they have little squabbles, but there's one big fight that is the catalyst for the time trouble. And every time I wrote, first of all, that scene has not, like from the very first draft, has not changed very much. There's a few tweaks that I made, but it really kind of stayed because for me, when I write really emotional stuff, it has to come from like this very like, my first draft is usually what I keep because I have to like be so in it. And this was so difficult. I cried every time I worked on it, every time, right? I have read this book probably now 100 times, but the fight scene always gets me because like you, I have and continue to have mommy issues. My mom and I had intense fights when I was a teenager. And it all very different from the fights that Priscilla and Sam have, but all stemming from the same thing, which is this like impasse of like understanding each other. And, when you're a teen girl, like, and your mom is being mean to you, or not getting you, it is like so hurtful. Nobody else could hurt me like my mom could hurt me. And not that she intentionally hurt me. Like, I really don't think she meant to. I have a lot of empathy for my mom as like, especially now that I'm a mom, but not even aside from that, just like being an adult in the world and understanding the world and knowing what my mom went through when she was raising me and my sister. It's like a miracle that my mom did such a good job, in my opinion. But I didn't know that at the time. All I knew when I was a teenager was, this is so unfair. Mom doesn't get me. She's so effing mean. She's such a biatch. My diary was like, oh God, I hate my mom. I didn't get it. So, I mean, honestly, that's why I wrote this book. 'Cause it's like, what if you could have a shortcut to understanding your mom? Because a lot of us don't get that empathy till we're older. And it's like, at that point, some of the damage has been done, right? And so those were lifted, like the feelings that Sam has of like just the frustration, the injustice, the like kind of like the hurt that she has, that was all coming from such a real place for me. So even though their fight was about something completely different, like the raw emotions behind it, you know, I cried every time I had a fight with my mom. And what's really interesting is like, just the dynamic that my mom and I have, I could never apologize to her in person. That would just be uncomfortable and weird. But also like I would just cry anytime and I would just get mad if I try to explain my feelings to her. So I often wrote her notes, like handwritten notes, and I would just leave them for her to say, you know, I'm sorry. Because that was the only way I could really communicate with her. And so it's interesting. She's going to read this book. She's coming to my book launch with her book club. And I'm like, okay, enjoy everybody.
Does she know that it's you've pulled from a lot of scenarios and like personal experiences? Is she aware?
I don't think she knows that specifically. I don't even know if she knows. I left this book at her house this week. Like, oh, here, mom, you can have an early copy. She's like, oh, okay, cool. So I'm sure she's going to be like, oh boy, mother, daughter. It's like, she's going to know, but she's not.
I remember this one.
Yeah, she'll be like, oh crap. But you know, my first novel, Since You Asked, was very like autobiographical. Actually, it was like my high school years and and I literally stamped like photocopied my family as the family in the book. So my mom at that time knew, and she's like, "Oh, this is going to be like so much stuff from our family, right?" And I'm like, "Yep." And she was cool with it. You know, to be honest, like I really can't complain about my mom as an adult. Like she's so supportive of me, and she knows I'm going to dig into our shit and put it out there. And I think she's like come to peace with that. As long as it's not egregious, obviously. So I think she'll just, you know, I wrote in my acknowledgments for this book, like, you know, I'm so grateful to you for my mom. And I had to write an entire book to express it because I don't know how else to show it to you. Just like when I was a kid, I wrote her notes. We just cannot talk about feelings in person, for better, for worse. You know, I used to think that was really messed up and dysfunctional, but now I very much accept it. It's just like, this is just, my mom didn't have the tools to be this kind of mom. And I don't expect her to be that kind of mom. And it's okay if we have our own dynamic that is different from other relationships. Like, I know that everything is rooted in love and caring about each other. You know, we don't need like a family, like a Full House Danny Tanner, you know, DJ Tanner moment. That's just not how our reality is.
Are the notes that you would write your mother the inspiration for the voice memos in this book here?
You know, I think in retrospect, I was like, oh, that reminds me of when I used to write notes from mom. But no, this was mostly like a device. Nobody wants to hear it, but it was kind of like, how do one, we have to show signs of Sam having some kind of inkling of like an interest in something, right? Because the whole like Sam's character arc, and I'm not going to ruin it for everybody, but like she begins the book very much like, I don't know what to do with, you know, I'm going to graduate high school. It's okay that I don't know what I'm going to do. Why is everybody on me, like giving me so much pressure to figure out my life? Who cares? I'm just somebody that's going to figure it out. And honestly, I actually think that's totally fine. But in her case, she's doing that as a protective measure because she's just pushing back against her parents. You know, it's not coming from a true place of being lost. It's a way to not try so that she doesn't fail her parents and have to deal with them. So the voice notes it's a way for her to like kind of express her feelings, and it shows a bit of a talent for storytelling on her end. Like you're going to see like, oh, you're funny, and you know, you have like these insights when you do these notes to your grandma, but also as a way for her to like in the past have a confidant when she time travels, because, you know, otherwise she's like just keeping all this stuff in her own head. So it's a good way for her to like say her feelings out loud to somebody. And that's her voice notes to her grandma.
Well, even in that relationship that she has with her grandmother, and to what you're saying with these voice notes and this creativity, it's almost like it seems, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, that self-preservation to keep her parents at bay, because then when she's talking about the voice memos, when her, you know, Sam is having dinner with her grandmother one night, and her mother pops over and she's like, oh, I didn't know you were going to be here. And the subject of the voice memo comes up, and her mother was shocked. And, you know, she kind of says to herself, like, of course you wouldn't know about this. Like, this isn't something that would be of interest to you. But she also noted that she was like, there was a peak of interest for a moment. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, her mother eventually says, she's like, well, but rather she gets that information than I hear about it.
Right. It's kind of like a moment where Sam shows vulnerability of like, oh, when mom finds out about the voice notes, is she interested? Would she want to hear them? And then Priscilla makes this like offhand comment like, oh God, like, I hope it's not another like lecture on the history of bananas. Cause like, she likes stuff like that. And so it just immediately makes Sam feel small again, you know? And, you know, I try to show like Priscilla's not a villain for being like that. You know, that's just not her interest. And she doesn't realize she's saying these things and hurting her daughter's feelings. She thinks Sam doesn't care, you know? So it's just, there's a lot of kind of misconceptions on both sides, which is usually what it is when people care about each other and have conflict.
Oh, absolutely. I have a question about process again. You were mentioning that when you were writing this, it was important to like get in headspace and everything. There are a few cuss words in this book, just a few. I am genuinely curious and interested. For a YA author, you would know, is there like a cutoff? Like you're allowed to have so many curse words, and is there something that you have to work with, like guidelines?
There aren't any strict guidelines, I don't think, for anybody, any publishing house, but it's totally up to you and the editor and maybe your publisher too, and how they position you. So for example, this book had the most curse words I've ever had in a book. I actually used the F word like a couple times. Mm-hmm. And my other books, none of them had the F word. I was literally told you cannot use the F word, because the audiences that we were writing for those last 4 books were a little, or not specifically for younger audiences, but it was available for them and we thought it would appeal to them. So we also wanted to make sure they're more library friendly. And so, you know, for me, I naturally just use a lot of bad words. As a teenager, I used a lot of bad words. So like my first drafts always have a ton of bad words in them. And then in the editing process, it's like, okay, like let's calm down and delete them. And, you know, if I was really adamant, like I want this word, it actually is important to show character, or this is what they would say, or this is authentic, I would fight for it. But almost always when the editor says like, do you need this? I'm like, you know what? You're right. I don't. But in this book, it's a new publisher, and it's for me, like trying to reach a broader audience, like older people, I think will read this. So I just kind of felt like, let's be a little more free with the bad words, in a way that feels authentic to the characters, especially in the 90s. You know, they would say all sorts of stuff in the 90s. So if I kept it super clean, to me, it would just lose authenticity. But at the same time, my editor also helped me pull back on this one. She's like, okay, cool. In this instance, maybe they don't need to say mother effer. And I'm like, perhaps. So, you know, I do always, because I am a potty mouth, I do have to always go back. But I've never heard of anybody being told like this is a rule, you cannot have bad words unless you write for middle grade or whatever. Obviously you can't. But in most cases, I feel I have freedom, but I'm always encouraged to dial back.
That's very interesting. That is just for my personal knowledge. And you were the expert to ask. That is wonderful.
And, you know, some authors like Rainbow Rowell, like their books have way more, you know, mature language, and it just suits the tone of their book. So I think it's kept in there. But for me, the tones of my books are not like super adult or dark. So if I had a lot of bad words, it would feel kind of jarring.
Oh, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And speaking of the process, what made you choose to have this take place in I say future loosely because we're recording this episode in 2023. This book takes place in 2025. So not far, you know, when you say the word 2025 out loud, it still feels so futuristic, but really it's only in a couple of years.
I know. That was purely for Actually, there's two reasons. One, so that we could have the past be 1995. Initially, it was 1993. And I know that sounds weird because it's just a 2-year difference, but pop culturally, there's a big difference. And especially for me, it was me being, 12 years old versus 14 and in high school. So I remember 1995 really well, all the music, all the fashion. But 1993 was more of a blur and I had to do more research, and it wasn't that much. I just feel like it wasn't very 90s. You know, the things that we think of as 90s, it all came like after 1995. So I kind of felt like, let's aim for 1995, in which case we might have to bump up present day. But I also did that on purpose because I kind of didn't want to talk about the pandemic that much. Like, I think we should all, whatever. I think acknowledging the pandemic, we're going to have to do it. It's like a reality. If any teen reads a book and it's like, you didn't go through a pandemic, what is this fantasy world? But hopefully by 2025, the kids that are seniors are not as heavily, like that's not the defining part of their high school years. So I wanted Sam to have like kind of a normal high school experience and not have to dwell on the pandemic too much.
Yeah. Well, saying that out loud,
I know, like, we were just sitting
Wow.
and processing. You're like, yeah. Because you, like, even the smallest thing where she was like, oh, go wash your hands, get ready for dinner. And she's like, why are you taking forever to wash your hands? We're like, oh, weren't we all finding a new, it wound up being like finding a new song. So, like, washing your hands didn't get, to make sure you did it for the right amount of time.
Happy birthday. Oh my gosh. So she has like I wanted to make sure, like, let's acknowledge that she is a pandemic teen, but, if she had been a senior or like, some of these kids, they spent 3 out of their 4 years in the pandemic. It's just, that defines their whole experience. And I'm like, I can't go there. That's not this book. So let's
acknowledge it, move on.
Yeah. She's going to acknowledge it. It is a fact of her life, but it didn't define her high school experience. Yeah.
and also having it set in the future, to me, gave it a very hopeful tone, just because we're opening it up and everything is very diverse. Everything is quite literally, it's lovely in my opinion, and it's not too far in the future. It's an attainable thing. We can all get there. It's right there for us. And I don't want to give the spoiler, of course. I know. I don't want to give the spoiler. It's very good. It's very good. But at the end, also as well, we are again a very hopeful ending. In all aspects. In the time travel is very well done, as we said. But also, Samantha has gone through a significant journey. I think you cannot travel back in time and not be completely fundamentally changed by it in every aspect. So to have her have that experience, come back, and then implement the lessons that she's internalized into her present day life to make active change was wonderful. And again, a very hopeful way to end the book.
Oh, thanks. I mean, I can't avoid writing hopeful books, even when the world is dark, which it was when I wrote this book, at the end of the day, I really believe that things could be better.
Oh, absolutely. And I think we have to kind of really hold on to that. Yeah. Now, Jess, I know we want to talk about the 90s a little bit. So when you were doing your research for this, I mean, I wrote down some references. We have Home Improvement, Zachary Ty Bryant, JTT. I mean, we've got it all there. Obviously, very much our childhood, and it is so fun to read these things. Jessica and I were speaking earlier, and usually pop culture references are kind of a sticking point for some people. Some people really like them. Some people really don't. Obviously, here they are necessary and very needed to really ground the story and really get you in it. What was your favorite kind of point about writing about the 90s? Like, what did you love the most? Obviously,
I loved the fashion. Because what's funny is that the fashion it's kind of all back. So at first I'm like, Sam's not going to know she's in the past because maybe everybody looks a little frumpier, you know, like I kind of feel like teens today, like know what looks good, right? Cause they have TikTok, they can do their hair and makeup. Back then we were just like lost, you know, trying our best and looking really bad for the most part. But the fashion is actually like just full on back to exactly the same. So, you know, she's wearing like a windbreaker, a sweatshirt, Vans, and jeans. Like that's not like Marty McFly going back to the 50s and he's wearing a down vest and everyone's wearing poodle skirts. Like that's like a big fashion gap, but for better for worse, like our fashion has not like changed into something completely different. But it was still really fun. I looked through like old Delia's catalogs. I don't know if you remember Delia's.
Yes,
oh my God.
Yes.
I was like, I dream of being a Delia girl. And then I just Googled like old teen magazine spreads, and oh God, it was like you think you remember the fashion and then you see it and you're like, oh yeah, flannel vest outfits. And I also loved making a playlist. That was like the first thing I did was like make a playlist from 1995, and music is like the number one thing that helps me get into a headspace when I'm writing. So being able to do 90s music research was like, it's not even research. I was just like, let me go. Mariah Carey, TLC, you know, like I just like knew it all. Like I knew, because that music never leaves you from when you're a teen. And then, you know, I also had fun Googling like, what's the current events of 1995 in October? And I was like, oh my God, the world was, and you know, Sam says that the world was always garbage. Like we think we're always living in the worst time, but every time has horrible things happening. So that was kind of fun too. Initially, when I did 1993, the big news story was the Lorena Bobbitt story. And I had so much fun writing Sam's reaction to that. But, you know, 1995, I had to take it out.
Yeah, there's definitely a sense of relatability when she goes, oh, well, I guess it's always been crappy, you know? She's like, you know, and I don't want to be like, oh, and this is the world in which we live. It was more of a, I'm not going at this alone. We're all in this together.
Yeah, it was comforting for me too, because I'm like, I do think we are kind of living in a more tumultuous than usual time. I'm not like discounting that, but it's not like there was some perfect past and we've like veered so far from it.
Well, and that's acknowledged through the the conversation surrounding technology and social media, or really lack thereof, because you also have Sam, you know, in the past thinking like, okay, this group would be considered the influencers, and you know, how are we getting information out there when you don't have all of the internet doesn't exist, cell phones don't exist, you only have print and television, and she's utilizing in the library. So she's utilizing what is available, what media outlets are available to her.
Yeah, there is also, I want to make it clear too that Sam is like, technology is rad. I will never take Google for granted again. Google Maps, like it does like really help, but it does also force her to appreciate those things about her present day. And you know, but at the same time, I feel like there was a wonderful time when teens did not have social media. And I feel very badly that all of them from now on, like they'll never know a world where you can just not have things online about you and like live forever. Ugh.
I guess the big question would be, was homecoming a big deal for you when you were in high school?
It was a big deal at our high school. Like it was really fun. But like, I was never, you know, I didn't really care about having a date or any of that kind of, or being homecoming queen or princess, like, because at our high school, it wasn't like there wasn't like a popular crowd or anything. So it is a popularity contest, but like nobody really cared. It's not like if whoever won homecoming queen wasn't like, oh, the prettiest popular girl in school. It was just like, oh, okay, yay, everybody voted for her. She had her friends vote, and that's nice. It was just a fun event that we all got into. Like we got really into like Spirit Day stuff. Like, you know how they wear pajamas to school? Like everyone really did it. And we hated our rival high school. And, the football game was always fun. So I do have such fond feelings about homecoming because it's like the whole school could be a part of it. It's senior prom. It's just seniors. So it's like a little more, there's a whole other thing, but I always loved homecoming because it was just like such a festive time in our school. So, and I wanted the book to be about homecoming rather than like prom queen. And I remember there was a logical reason for it. Might have been the time of year or something. Yeah, I didn't want to worry about college like decisions.
Keep it in the fall.
Stuff that you get stuck with when you write contemporary YA. You're like, wait, when do they have to do college apps, and when does she figure out which school she wants to go to? So, yeah.
And that conversation is there, but it's not like a driving force. Also, it's just part of the conversation because it is a natural part of the conversation of junior year, of senior year in high school too.
She's on the college path automatically just because she's like upper middle class and her parents are literally a brain surgeon and a lawyer. So it's like, obviously they're going to be like, you're going to college, ma'am. But she's like, fine, I'll go, but I don't know what I'm going to do. And I think I'm normal. And she has like a chip on her shoulder about that because her parents are, and she has an older brother that's like, they're so driven and they've all had like knew exactly what they wanted to do. And so she feels like a freak, but really she's like pretty normal, you know. She says, I'm the normal one. And I'm like, yes, you are, Sam, you are the normal one. But, you know, that doesn't mean that she can't have an interest. You know, I think like she just closed herself off from having a passion because it was like a reaction against her parents. So I wanted to give her like a hint and an idea of like, maybe you do have an interest in something and it's okay to embrace that too.
Yeah, and even that just because you have an interest in something doesn't mean it also has to be something that drives like for career or for income. She's like, oh, you know, that was it. She was like, it's people can have passions and not make it their whole personality too.
Oh yeah. She says to her mom, like, you don't have to mine everything for college apps, you know, so mean, but like, it's true. Like, can I just enjoy something and not have it be like, it'll look good on my college applications? But you know, that's the kind of person her mom is. So
And I have to say that one of my favorite introductions in this story is the introduction of Priscilla when Samantha first meets her. Just everything about it is perfect, down to the high top shoes with the puffy paint. I want them. I read that. I had like a need. So thank you for that. I am going to be on eBay looking for these shoes.
No, I actually was like, maybe for my book launch, I'm going to get like some white high tops and put my name on them, puffy paint, but I've run out of time and it won't match my outfit. But yeah, I just remember cheerleaders having all sorts of things like that, all their little like bows, and you know, I find it like so fun. And Priscilla would have like all of that stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Jess, yeah?
I have kind of just like a question, like it's kind of book related, kind of not. What's the first thing you would do if you found yourself back in 1995?
Oh, you know, let me think. I do think, and this is going to sound corny and too close to my book, but it is true. I would go find my grandma and hang out with her because she passed away like 7 years ago now? Yeah, so I would probably go and hang out with my grandma.
That is a beautiful answer.
It's so wonderful.
Yeah.
So corny, but it's like,
no, it makes sense. You put so much, like you said, you're like, oh, this is so cheesy from the book, but like you put so much of yourself in this book and you've done so beautifully. And we're so excited. We're just like, everybody should read it. Everybody should option it. We were talking before we were recording. We were like, and this one and this one and this studio. And I was just, I was putting my little thinking. I work in entertainment, so I was putting all my little hats in it too.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, I cannot talk about things, but hopefully I can soon.
And Jess and I were saying just how important this book is for kids, really. And I say kids, like that's because I feel old, but like middle school and high school and older, and how wonderful it will be to have, a middle school or older person read this, and then they will have the honor and the privilege to revisit this later on in life and to apply all of these lessons and to look back on this thing that they read when they were young and see how much they have grown and what understanding looks like to them. And these kids that are going to read this, all of these new readers are so very lucky to have this, to have you to share these stories. And just the fact that this book needs to be accessible, needs to be in the libraries, needs to be out there for everyone. It is wonderful. Thank you for sharing this with us.
Thank you so much. That means the world to me. And yes, I would love to envision a future where this book is like so highly regarded that somebody will return to it when they're an adult. That would be a dream. And I also hope that kids get their hands on this book, because I do think it could resonate with them and stick with them.
I feel like what's wonderful is kids can read this. And again, same. Like, I think we're all in the same generation here, where kids can read this and be like, yeah, exactly. Somebody gets it. Like, you get so frustrated. But then even reading it as adults, you're just like, oh, yeah, but Priscilla has a point too. Like, you understand where she's coming from. And to have just it, to have the empathy that comes with these conversations and these relationships is just so beautiful. And we appreciate you taking the time to share it with, discuss it with us and share it with everyone. And we can't wait till everybody continues to read and it's out in the world officially on April 11th.
Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. I feel the love. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Maurene Goo, just my full name. And my website has pretty much everything you need to know about my books and events and any sort of news. So that's at Maurene Goo. MaureneGoo.com.
And you have a bunch of signings and events coming up this coming week too, right?
Yeah, I've got my book launch is in LA on the 12th, and then I'm in New York on the 15th. I am in Chicago on the 25th, and I am at the LA Times Book Festival and at Y'all West. And then I'll be at the Bay Area Book Festival the first week of May.
Oh, that's
busy. You have like a busy next couple weeks.
Yeah, I spread it all out because I have a kid. So we'll see how I fare.
You will manage it with grace. I just know it. I just know it. Thank you so much for all of your time.
Oh my gosh. Thank you guys so much. I had such a blast. Thank you guys.
Thanks. And as Maurene said, please make sure you're checking her out on all her socials and her websites. We'll make sure that we'll have that information in our show notes as well. And also feel free to follow us on Instagram. We're at ACOFAE Podcast, and we're also both on TikTok, ACOFAE Laura and ACOFAE Jessica. Thanks so much for joining for us, and we hope to talk to y'all soon. Bye.